Hey, welcome to the 1984 show. With the restart of professional basketball this week as the NBA resumes games in the Bubble in Orlando, Florida, I thought that I'd take a few minutes to share with you some of the unbelievable, revolutionary changes that you can expect to see coming to the NBA soon. You know, no organization has done more to develop, promote, and shape the game of basketball than the NBA. So let me start with just a really quick review of the NBA's role in the sport before we get to some of the shocking changes that are coming. The game of basketball has been around for 129 years since it was created in Springfield, Massachusetts by Dr. James Naismith back in 1891. At first, the game was played with peach baskets and something like a soccer ball, and only 13 rules originally existed. As a matter of fact, every time a bucket was scored, the game had to come to a halt so that the janitor could bring out a ladder and remove the ball. Eventually, they figured out that the game could move along a lot faster if they removed the bottoms of the fruit baskets. After 3 years, Dr. Naismith asked Spalding to construct the first basketball, but it still took more than a decade after that before metal hoops, nets, and backboards were introduced. There's obviously been a huge transformation that the game of basketball has undergone from the days of its humble beginnings, and no organization has done more to change the game of basketball than the NBA. The NBA was originally known as the BAA, or Basketball Association of America, when it was founded in New York City in June 1946, soon after the end of World War II. And after merging with a rival league 3 years later, became known as the National Basketball Association, or NBA. The number of changes that have occurred in the NBA over the decades are too many to mention. They introduced rules that incorporated the 24-second shot clock, outlawed the dunking of free throws like Wilt Chamberlain used to do, and adopted the three-point shot and dunk contest from their old rival, the ABA. Add to that the fact that notable NBA players have not only changed the way that the game is played, but have shaped and changed culture and fashion as well. Would the three-pointer be as prevalent in today's play had Steph Curry not started lighting things up from long range a few years ago? Players like Allen Iverson not only changed the game with his iconic crossover, but he caused the NBA to rethink their dress code on numerous occasions. While the fashion choices of other players like Dennis Rodman caused everyone to scratch their heads. And, up until the 80s, if you were a basketball player, you wore what today would seem like embarrassingly short shorts. If you look at the shorts that Michael Jordan wore in his rookie season of 1985, you can see just how much he changed things compared to his later years in the league. Though, now, the popularity of short shorts may be swinging back in the other direction. So, as the game continues to shift and change, it's no wonder that the NBA is promoting itself during this restart with a hashtag whole new game. So what will this whole new game look like? Well, no one can predict the future, but given some recent trends, I think it's reasonable to suggest that the biggest contributing factors to the future of the NBA are race and politics. After the first year of the NBA's existence as an all-white league, Wataru Misaka, a 5'7" point guard of Japanese descent, became the first non-white NBA player. 3 years later, Earl Lloyd became the first black player to play in the NBA on October 31st, 1950. Fast forward 70 years, and now colored players comprise nearly 82% of the league's rosters. Additionally, significant numbers of black coaches and administrators are now part of the league's makeup. This makes it understandable that we are seeing the Black Lives Matter logo painted on the NBA's 3 courts in Orlando for the culmination of this season. But, you see, that's actually where the irony kicks in. The Black Lives Matter organization, according to their own official website, concerns itself with a whole host of objectives that actually have nothing to do with black lives. Each of the co-founders are self-professing students and adherents of Marxism, and a quick perusal of their What We Believe statements confirm that beyond a shadow of a doubt. What is comical is that in this age of hypersensitive language policing, a league that is 82% black would ignorantly promote Marxism when Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, the founders of Marxist thought, referred to people of color as niggers, and a degree nearer to the rest of the animal kingdom than the rest of us. Well, aside from having extremely racist roots, what are the inevitable outcomes of a league like the NBA promoting Marxism? Due to time considerations, we won't get into a lengthy discussion on all aspects of Marxism, but here are just a few of the major principles of Marxism and how they would directly affect the league's players. Abolition of property in land. Ouch, that's going to hurt. One of the things that NBA players are known for is using those exorbitant salaries to fund high-priced mega mansions. It's going to be a shame to see NBA players have to forfeit them all to the state. A heavy progressive or graduated income tax. Ouch again. Under current IRS tax brackets, players have to hand over an unbelievable amount of their income to the government. What a shame that would increase substantially. But it's one of the guiding principles of Marxism. Each will produce according to his ability, and each will receive according to his need. I suppose that the good news is that it's a way of players giving back to their community, right? Sharing it with the fans. Well, the good news is that because they already had to forfeit their homes, they aren't required to make mortgage payments any longer, so I suppose that they can get by on a little less. A little side note, however, is that as recently as April of 2020, C.J. McCollum, who serves as a current vice president of the NBA's Players Union, stated that 1/3 of the players in the league were already living paycheck to paycheck, despite the fact that the annual minimum wage for players is just shy of $900,000 a year. Abolition of all right of inheritance. You know, there are quite a few NBA players who have worked diligently at negotiating their contracts, playing hard, and saving for their future generations. But alas, Marxism doesn't allow for you to leave an inheritance for your loved ones. It all goes back to the collective. Sorry, young Bronny, you're just going to have to earn your own, and under far different circumstances than your father did, I might add. Confiscation of the property of all emigrants and rebels. Oh no, here we go with the confiscation of property again. But this time it applies to anyone who leaves the country or is considered rebellious. And it's not just limited to real estate. All those fancy toys are just going to have to be redistributed to the working class. Centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state. Do you know what this means? It means that your First Amendment rights are stripped from you because the state gets to determine what you can and cannot say. In other words, the NBA is currently using their First Amendment right to free speech to advocate for a system that was developed by racists to strip them of their right to free speech. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, but you say, that would never happen here in the United States. But you see, that's where you're wrong. It's already happened this past fall when Daryl Morey, the general manager of the Houston Rockets, made the mistake of tweeting his support of Hong Kong, a region of China that seeks a system of governance that affords its residents more liberty than that experienced by the average Chinese citizen. What was the result of his tweet? Chinese officials requested that Morey be fired for expressing his personal opinion on his own personal Twitter account. Additionally, the NBA is already limiting their players' free speech by allowing the players to replace their own name on their player jerseys with social justice messages this season, but only from a very slim number of league-approved messages. Also, factories and instruments of production should be owned by the state. In other words, if Black Lives Matter gets their way, the NBA will be wholly owned and operated by the state. There will be no more NBA Players Union. The state will oversee all of the players' affairs. This will also remove the current need for players' agents, since the need to negotiate contracts and such will simply vanish. There will be just one salary that each player will receive, regardless of their performance, and the state will determine that amount. How does $15 an hour sound? Well, that's just a quick little sampling of what Marxism espouses and how that might translate into the NBA's future. Now, you might think that I'm exaggerating these points since socialism, a form of government that has its origins in Marxism, has become so mainstream today, with well-known proponents such as Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez attempting to make socialism appealing to the masses. Accompanied by widespread ignorance on the topic, more and more young people are believing that socialism sounds like an attractive alternative. Recently, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio even quoted Karl Marx in a public address. But the founders of Marxism recognized that socialism was merely a stepping stone on the way to full-blown communism. Let me just paint a quick picture for you of what the difference is between a free society and one that has embraced Marxism. Here is a clip of what a training camp looks like in the United States of America, where the God-given rights of the individual are protected by the Constitution. And here is what a training camp looks like in communist-run China, where the seeds of Marxism have taken root and are now bearing fruit. What you are seeing here is leaked drone footage of an ethnic minority in China known as the Uyghurs. Under China's treatment of minorities under communism, these same minorities endure forced slave labor as well as forced organ harvesting. Here's what the NBA's current transportation looks like. And here is what transportation looks like for minorities in China. This footage is of the same Uyghurs being rounded up and put on trains. Do you see the difference? But I can hear you saying, that could never happen here in the US. That's China. But here's the deal. It's reported that the NBA currently derives about 10% of its revenue from China, with conservative estimates that that number will double within the decade. The NBA has had high-dollar contracts with China Central Television, or CCTV, the Chinese state-run television network. When the earlier mentioned scuffle over Daryl Morey's tweet occurred, CCTV preempted televising NBA games, which cost the NBA hundreds of millions of dollars. LeBron James, who has personified the league's embrace of political activism perhaps more than any other player, said that Morey was misinformed on the matter. But keep in mind that in 2015, LeBron signed a $1 billion contract with Nike, a corporation that has utilized the slave labor of Chinese ethnic minorities for decades to produce much of its footwear. And LeBron is not an exception. More NBA players are endorsed by Nike by far than any other shoe brand. The problem has become so prevalent that it motivated Missouri Senator Josh Hawley to introduce a bill recently which holds major corporations like the NBA and Nike accountable for the use of slave labor in their supply chains. President Trump even sanctioned a number of Chinese companies recently for their use of slave labor and other forms of repression against ethnic minorities in China. One of them was Nanjing Synergy Textiles, which is owned by Victory City International Holding, a company that supplies Nike. Furthermore, Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee recently expressed concern over the NBA's dealings with a country governed by a communist regime that has abused human rights on such a grand scale. LeBron James says that he doesn't think that every issue should be everybody's problem, but since he's profiting so handsomely from his current relationships with Nike and China, he might want to consider adopting this issue as his problem, if not for himself, then perhaps for his own children and the black lives that he says he cares for. Without a doubt, historically, Marxists have relied on what others have termed the useful idiot or mindless foot soldier to carry out their objectives. Perhaps it's LeBron James who's misinformed. As Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has recently been pointing out, in a totalitarian communist regime, there are no private corporations. There is no free enterprise. If you are dealing with a Chinese company, you are, in effect, dealing with an arm of the Chinese Communist Party. If you are supporting a Chinese business, you are directly supporting, among other things, extreme racism and forced slavery, some of the very things that NBA players have become so vocal about opposing. Hopefully, the NBA will make some of the tough decisions that are required to do the right thing in regards to its future. However, at present, it's difficult to see anything but gross hypocrisy represented in the league's actions. At this point, it seems that they are engaged in a game of self-sabotage as they continue to officially promote and line the pockets of the very entities that stand opposed to them. The NBA has it right when they prophesy whole new game over themselves, but I'm afraid that if they don't change their direction, that whole new game may not look like the one that they had envisioned. Remember this when you vote in November. It's not just the NBA who's currently supporting the efforts of those who would destroy them if further empowered. It's up to us to make the right choices as well. Until next time, grace and peace to you.